Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel and Yitzhak Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Pei Zayin Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the very bottom line of Pei Vav Amud Beis, bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Beis, in middle of Sif Gimel, the last few words on the page, V'yesh mi she'omer. Our learning today should be as Chosr Fui Shalema for Rachel Shalva Basit Lefreda, Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha, Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, Chavadasa bas Rezel Serel, Dvar bas Shoshabina, Rivka bas Shira Leah. They should have Rafui Shalema B'Sarch Shar Chayla Yisrael. Our learning should also be as Chosr. Rabbi Shalom should watch over all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way, B'chol Makom Shehem. So, we're continuing to learn the halachas over here that pertain to doing some type of cleaning to garments on Shabbos and to folding garments on Shabbos. So, we're holding here in the middle of Sif Gimel, and in Sif Gimel, the Mechaber told us, Mikaplim Kelim B'Shabbos. Under certain circumstances, you are allowed to fold garments on Shabbos. Now, what is the potential problem of folding a garment on Shabbos? It's a problem of tikkun moneh. Tikkun moneh is a part of makeh b'patish. When you do something, when you do an action to improve something, to make something better in any way, to strengthen it, to improve its appearance, this is a problem usually at the Rabbanon of tikkun moneh, at least in what we're speaking about over here. We're dealing with the Rabbanans largely. So it's a problem here of tikkun moneh. Having said that, Chazal, and in the previous share I read to you the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Chazal were matir kipul begadim. Under certain circumstances, they were matir you to fold your clothing on Shabbos, basically so that you shouldn't look like a shlump on Shabbos. Chazal wanted that you should be able to look menschlich on Shabbos. If you're not going to fold your begadim, they're going to get all wrinkled and you're going to look very schlumpy. So in order to avoid that, they relaxed the restriction over here of tikkun moneh, and they said you could fold begadim. However, the Mechaber basically gave us over here 5 different tanoim, 5 conditions that must be met in order for you to be allowed to fold the beged. Tanai number 1 was, it has to be l'tzarech Shabbos. It has to be that you're going to wear the beged on Shabbos. So if you're taking off the beged Friday night and you're going to put it on Shabbos morning, that is l'tzarech Shabbos. Condition number 2, the Mechaber said, you're only allowed to do this if you are folding it by yourself. If you're folding a beged using 2 people, the example that I gave is the way people fold long tablecloths. So one takes one end, one takes the other end. They fold it, and then they fold it again. Or let's say linens, large, quilt covers, large sheets. So again, you use 2 people to fold it. That you can't do. You're only allowed to fold something if it's being done by 1 person. Why? Because once it's being done by 2 people, you're usually doing a much better job. That already looks much more like tikkun moneh. Condition number 3 that the Mechaber set was that you're only allowed to do this by relatively new clothing. Why? The Mishnah Berurah said that new clothing is still stiff. It's still in very good condition. And therefore the folding doesn't seem to accomplish that much. Since it doesn't accomplish so much, again, it doesn't really look like tikkun moneh. Condition number 4 the Mechaber gave was you could only do this by begadim levanim. You can only do it by white garments. Why white garments? So it seems, the Mishnah Berurah tells us over here, that the bitzvuim, this was Mishnah Berurah's Tezayin, the bitzvuim, by dyed and colored garments, hakipel misakin yoiser. I don't know if this has to do with the way their begadim were made back in the day, the effect of the dyeing on the beged, but somehow when you had a dyed and colored beged, the folding accomplished much more. And since it accomplished much more, again, it looked much more like tikkun moneh. Then the Mechaber said, if you're missing any of these 5 tanoim, then you're not allowed to do any folding on Shabbos. And in Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Yud Gimel, the Mishnah Berurah gave us a very, very practical example of where folding would be usher. And that is, you go to shul Shabbos morning and you wear your talis. At the end of davening, you take off your talis. You're not allowed to fold the talis on its original creases. You want to keep your talis nice and creased nicely, that sharp crease that's in the middle of the talis, and then the second crease where you fold it in half. You want to keep those creases nice and firm so that your talis always stays nice and flat, because you always fold it in a nice, neat way. You're not allowed to fold your talis on those creases on Shabbos. The first one of the Tanoim that you're missing over there is that this is not being done l'tzara Shabbos. Your pashtus, you're not going to wear the talis again. You're taking it off after Shachris. You're not wearing your talis by Mincha. There's no reason to assume you're going to put your talis on again Shabbos afternoon, so you're not allowed to fold it because it's not l'tzara Shabbos. So right away, you're missing one of the Tanoim. So the Mishnah Berurah told us you're not allowed to fold your talis after davening Shabbos morning. Now we go to the bottom line here of Pei Vav and Beis, and the Mechaber says, V'yesh mi she'omer, there is one that says, this is brought down from the Mordechai, V'yesh mi she'omer, delekaploi shaloi kiseder kipuloi harishon. If you're going to fold the beged, but you're not going to fold the beged on its original creases. So here again, we have a very, very practical example of this. Let's say, again, let's use the example of the talis. So the talis has its creases that you normally fold the talis on. So if after davening Shabbos morning, you want to fold up your talis, but you're not going to fold it on its creases, you want to basically fold it up so that it shouldn't become all wrinkled. If you just take the talis and take it off and slump it up and drop it down on the table, by the time Motzi Shabbos comes, it's going to be all creased up. So you want to keep it neat. So you want to fold it, but you're not going to fold it kiseder kipuloi harishon. You're not going to fold it on its pre-existing creases. So now, you're not making those creases any firmer. You're not improving the beged in any way. You're just kind of preventing it from getting creased worse. So, yesh bisha omer de lakaple shaloi kiseder kipuloi harishon mutter b'chol inyan. That's completely mutter, says the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber here, in the name of this Yesh Misha Omer, in the name of the Mordechai. And the Mechaber concludes, V'nirin Dvarav. And the Mechaber says, I see his words. V'nirin, it seems to be proper. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. We had started Mishnah Berurah's Kat Yud Zayin, but let's do it again. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Kat Yud Zayin, which in my print is the very bottom in the Mishnah Berurah on Pei Vav and Beis. Ve'ein loy. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed one of the Tanoim that the Mechaber gave. One again, there were 5 Tanoim that the Mechaber gave. It has to be l'tzara Shabbos. It has to be you're folding it one person alone. It has to be relatively new begadim. They have to be white. And then the 5th one was ve'ein loy lahachlif. You don't have anything else to wear. If you have something else to wear something else. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Kat Yud Zayin ve'ein loy lahachlif. Avalim yesh loy lahachlif beged achel Shabbos. If you have a different beged that you could wear, so you don't have to come on to this question of folding a beged, then says the Mishnah Berurah, Afa pi she'ein yafa kazeh, even if the second beged is not as nice a beged as the one that you wanted to wear, then lo yitir lo lekaploi. Then Chazal did not relax the heter to go ahead and fold begadim. Again, this is a derabanan that Chazal had to relax in order for you to be allowed to do it on Shabbos. They're relaxing the Yisr of Tikkun Maneh. You have another beged to wear that's not creased. Go ahead, wear another beged. Don't worry about folding this beged so that it shouldn't become creased. V'cholshkein, continues the Mishnah Berurah, v'cholshkein, certainly. Imein daiter lil boish klal boi b'yom da'aser v'chanal b'sif kitten yud gemel. Certainly, you're not allowed to fold something if you have no intention of wearing it again on Shabbos, like we said in Mishnah Berurah's kitten yud gemel by the talis. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, there is an exception to this rule, and that is b'yom tov shechal be'erev Shabbos. Let's say Yom Tov was erev Shabbos, so you wore your Shabbos talis by davening Yom Tov morning, Friday morning. Friday was Yom Tov. Friday morning you wore your Shabbos talis. Okay, you're not intending on wearing it anymore today. Mutter lekapel talisai kishapoishtoi. Imhi chadasha ulevana Av she'ein daitoi lelav shoi boi b'yoyim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you're dealing with a beged which is white, and it's relatively new, you're allowed to fold it, Av she'ein daitoi lelav shoi boi b'yoyim, even though you're not going to wear it again. V'hainu kisha'asai ruve tavshilin, this is only true if you made an erev tavshilin. I don't want anybody to make a mistake. I did not just intend to give you a heter that if Yom Tov is on Friday, you're allowed to fold your talis on its creases Friday morning in preparation for Shabbos. I'm not giving you that heter. When the Mishnah Berurah says over here talisai, I don't think he means talisai. I think he means a beged. Again, we're talking about a beged. I don't think over here this means a shul talis. What he means is like this. We're talking about this whole shiloh of folding begadim, and again, one of the tanoim that we had was that you're only allowed to fold the beged if you're going to be wearing it again that day. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if Erev Shabbos was a Yom Tov, and you want to fold a beged on Friday, and you're not going to wear it anymore on Friday, but you want to wear it on Shabbos, then if you meet the other tanoim, if it's new and if it's white, etc., then you're allowed to fold it, even though you're l'chayra missing one of the tanoim. One of the tanoim was that you're going to wear it again that day. Over here, you don't need the tanai that you're going to wear it again that day. Why? Because even though you're not going to wear it Friday, you want to wear it Shabbos. So when you want to fold it on Friday, you're folding it l'tzarech Shabbos. So that would be mutter. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, that's only true. V'hainu kisha'asa ruve tavshilin. This would only be true if you prepared an erev tavshilin that allows you to perform hachana. It allows you to make preparations from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Otherwise, there would be an isser of hachana involved. Rabbi Kiva Eiger proves the af b'loyid hiniach a ruve tavshilin shari im hismuch l'Shabbos, and I'm not going to go into a very complex Rabbi Kiva Eiger. Okay, then we come to the mechaber that we had actually started with already today, which is the Yesh Oimrim, the Mordechai, the Yesh Misha Omer, that says that you're allowed to fold a beged if you're not folding it on its original creases. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Says the Mishnah Berurah, he explains the reason why it's okay, let's say, to fold your talis Shabbos morning if you're not folding it on the creases, is because the folding that you're doing is not going to accomplish anything. If you fold it on the creases, you're strengthening the creases and you're keeping the original creases. But if you fold it not on the creases, there's nothing that you're doing that's going to make any kind of lasting improvement in the beged. The ain't kan misakin klal. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, you can't call this tikkun moneh. And therefore, it's mutter even if you're missing the other tanoim. You know, it doesn't have to be that you're doing it l'sar Shabbos and it's white and it's relatively new and eloi lahachlif. You don't need any of these tanoim. Why? Because what you're doing is not tikkun moneh. There's no tikkun moneh involved. Eyes cut Yud Tes, and the Mechaber closed off Siv Gimel by saying, V'nirin Devarav, he likes this psak of the Mordechai. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'chein chsasmu ha'achreinim ledina, and indeed, says the Chavetz Chaim, the Achreinim have accepted this halacha l'maisa, this Mordechai, that's taka the psak. If you're folding something, but you're not folding it on its creases, then it's okay, because that's not tikkun moneh. Yet, says the Mishnah Berurah, he takes a very hard line here. When we come, he brings down from machzah shekel. Certainly, if you want to be machmer and you don't want to do any folding, unless you have the full 5 tanoim of the beginning of Siv Gimel, that it's l'tzar Shabbos, and that you're doing it with one person, and that it's relatively new, and that it's white, and you don't have anything else. If you don't want to fold anything, except if you could fulfill all of those 5 tanoim, that would be even better. But I could tell you that halacha l'maisa, we are noyeg to fold the talis if you're not folding it on its creases after davening Shabbos morning. Let's finish this Mishnah Berurah, then maybe I'll just talk a little bit more about this. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, and he says, Matzienes hamitais milele Shabbos l'Shabbos. You're allowed to make your bed Friday after Shabbos night, after Shabbos has already begun. So this is, it sounds, the lashon is a little bit funny. Matzinas hamitais milele Shabbos l'Shabbos. It sounds like it's saying that you're allowed to, I guess it could be Friday night also for Shabbos day. But I think what this means is you can make the bed Shabbos evening, earlier Friday night before you went to sleep, in preparation of going to sleep Friday night. But it would be better if you did it before Shabbos. Aval, however, ein matziin mi Shabbos l'maitzoi Shabbos. However, says the Mishnah Berurah initially, what you cannot do is make your bed Shabbos morning when you get up in preparation of going to sleep on Motzei Shabbos. Because then, whatever you're doing, you're not doing L'Tzar Shabbos, you're doing it for Motzei Shabbos. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, assumedly the bed is in your house, and you don't want your room to be schlumpy for Shabbos, because it's not pakavadik for Shabbos, that on Shabbos your bedroom should be a mess, then then you're allowed to make the bed, because you're actually doing it for Shabbos. You're not doing it for Motzei Shabbos. The Mikri Tzarech Shabbos, he brings this down from the Magen Avram. So, when it comes to the halacha lamaisa over here of kipul begadim, of folding begadim on Shabbos. So again, you're running the risk here of tikkun maneh. If you're doing something, if you're folding something in a way where it's going to keep it nice and fresh and straight and everything else, you're running into the problem here of tikkun maneh. If I try to think about where this is most negeya on Shabbos, somebody is getting ready for bed on Friday night. He takes off his suit, and to take the suit and line up the creases, because you want to keep the creases on your suit pants nice and crisp, and carefully align the creases and put it down, that probably would be a problem over here of kipul begadim, because think about it. Are you fulfilling all 5 tanoim? No. Are you doing it L'Tzar Shabbos? Yes, you're doing it L'Tzar Shabbos. Are you doing it with Adam Echad? Are you doing it you yourself? Yes, you are. Chadoshim she'adayin lo niskabsu. Could you fulfill the t'nai of it being new? That's already debatable. Now, why do I mean it's debatable? I mean, you're going to think to yourself, if my suit is 6 months old, it's certainly not new. Well, that depends. It could be that when you take your suit and you give it to the cleaners, and you get it back nice and freshly pressed, and you have a decent quality suit, if you have a cheap, flimsy suit, especially if it's old, it doesn't hold its creases well, even when it's been freshly pressed. But if you have a quality suit, and it's not worn out, and you get it back freshly pressed, I'm not sure that wouldn't fill the condition of chadoshim, but it's not levanim, it's not white. If you have a black suit or a blue suit or a gray suit, it's not white. Also, are you going to fulfill the Tanai of Ein Lo Lahachlif? Is this your only suit? Do you not have another suit? So to take the suit pants and carefully line up the creases and put it over the chair or on a hanger very carefully, that I think would run into a problem of kipul begadim. On the other hand, to take off the pants and just kind of, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. I don't think what you have to do is take off your pants and then just throw them over a chair, however they happen to land. If you take the pants and you hold it by the top and you kind of fold in the opening, in the waist, right? You fold in the opening and you turn it sideways and you put it over the chair and it falls onto the creases, that's okay. You're not going ahead and lining up the creases and laying it down on the creases. You're allowing it to fall onto the creases. And I'm looking especially also at the language of the Aruch HaShulchan, and I think that this is what the Aruch HaShulchan is talking about. To put it down so that it falls onto the creases would be okay. Also, if you could take the pants and you could throw it over a hanger and it lands on the creases, again, I think that's okay. To take it and line it up on the creases, you take the pants from the bottom, from the hem, and you line up those creases and you hold it nice and straight, you put it under your chin, and then you follow the creases down with your fingers, and you keep it all lined up on the creases, fold it over and put it into the hanger. That's where you're going to run into a problem of kipul begadim. But if you could take the pants from the top and feed it through the hanger and let it drape over the hanger and it falls naturally onto the creases, I don't think you have an issue of kipul begadim over there. Again, this is a very complex topic. It's hard within the strictures of what we do here to get too deep into the halacha l'maisa, trying to cover what is kind of the typical shilas. If you want to get into questions of folding linens and tablecloths, to fold them onto creases, if you're the type that you have sharp creases in your tablecloth and you want them to have sharp creases, to fold them onto the creases is a problem. Again, that's going to be kipul begadim. You're going to fall into tikkun mana over there. To fold them up not on the creases, roll them up in a kind of neat way, but not on the creases, l'chayra, that would be okay. All right, let's go a little bit weiter over here. Well, not a little bit. We still have to tackle the page. Okay, Sif Daled, top line, Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, the middle of the line. Says the Mechaber, machbesh. What's a machbesh? A machbesh was a press. Machbesh, a clothing press. Hu kli, this is a utensil, shekoivshin by begadim achar hakvisa, that they would use to press clothing after they were laundered. Now, what was this press? How was it constructed? Says the Ramah here, Vehem shtei luchais, these were two boards, zeh al zeh, one on top of the other, v'habegadim beinehem, and the beged was placed between the boards. Now Rashi on the Gemara gives a little bit more of an in-depth description of this press. Let me just grab a pen over here, I think it'll be handy. Okay, so I want you to imagine like this. You have a board, okay? You have a sizable board. Think about a pair of pants that you want to press. You want to press the legs of the pants. So think about a board that's about the length of the leg, or the two legs of a pair of pants. So you have a board. In each corner of the board, there's a hole. And in each one of those holes, there's a dowel that goes up through the hole, right? So you've got a board laying down. The board's got a hole in each one of the four corners, and there's a pole that goes up through the hole at every corner. Now you have a matching board, a corresponding board that has corresponding holes in its corners. So you take your pair of pants, you line it up nice and neat on the bottom board. Then you take the top board and you line up the holes of the top board with those poles that are on the corners coming up from the bottom board, and you slide the top board down on those poles down to the bottom board, and now the pair of pants is trapped between the two boards. Now at this point you still don't have pressure, and you want pressure. So what you do is you squeeze the two boards together, then the poles that went up in the corners had holes in them, so that you could take a peg and you could put a peg into the hole on those poles. Each one of the four poles had holes, and you would push down the top board and clear the lowest hole that you could clear on the pole, and then you would put in a peg. So now the top board is forced down and it's held down on top of the beged that's between the two boards. So this was a very primitive clothing press known as a machbesh. So now let's read again from the beginning of Sif Daled. Machbesh, a press. Hu kli shekavshe by begadam achar hakvisa. This was the keli that you would press the clothing in after you wash them. Vehem shtei luchai zeh al zeh v'begadam beinehem, so that you had two boards with the clothing trapped between them. Shel balabayas. If this was a consumer grade machbesh, it was a household machbesh. If you had a household machbesh, and now your Shabbos pants are in the machbesh, and you got up Shabbos morning, and you want to put on your pants, and you realize that the pants that you're going to wear are in the machbesh, says the Mechaber, you could open up the machbesh, and you could take out the pair of pants. Vishel uman, but if you had a commercial machbesh, an uman is a craftsman, shel uman, if you had a commercial machbesh, osir, that you would not be allowed to open up. Why? Mipnei shehu tachuv b'chazka, because the commercial grade machbesh was a heavy duty machbesh, and when that machbesh was closed, it was closed with significant force, and it was made to stay closed. The HaTorah, and therefore when you release it and you open it up, doimel stira. This would be similar to the malacha of stira. The malacha of stira is the malacha of demolishing. It's the opposite of the malacha of boine, building. Boine is building, stira is demolishing, destroying. The commercial machbesh, when it was closed, it was intended to stay closed. Therefore, when you open it up, it's like you're breaking the machbesh. So again, the Mechaber is telling us here, household machbesh, you're allowed to open it up and take out the clothing. Commercial machbesh, you're not allowed to open it up and take out the clothing. What's the problem that we're dealing with over here? In this sif, it sounds like we're dealing with a boina issue. Is it a question of stira to open up the machbesh or not open up the machbesh? We don't seem to be talking right now about tikkun moneh, certainly not talking about malabein, right? We seem to be talking about binyan and stira. So why is it here? It's here because we're talking about kipul begadim, so we're talking about what you do with your clothing and keeping them straight and everything else. So right away it brings to mind a press. So we have kind of a peripheral halacha here of the shaila of stira, of opening up the press to take out the clothing. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah Kaf. L'tzarech HaShabbos, ava shaloi l'tzarech Shabbos. The Mechaber says that you're allowed to open up the household press if you're doing it l'tzarech Shabbos. How about if I'm not doing it l'tzarech Shabbos? How about if my Sunday pants are in the press? Can I open up the press and take out my Sunday pants? Why do you want to? Kasha f'maisa. I don't know why. But are you allowed to do that? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. You're not allowed to. Now, also, you're not allowed to put clothing into the press on Shabbos. If the pants that you're putting in there are at tzarech choil, you're not allowed to put pants into the press. Now, this is a little bit interesting, because it sounds over here from the Mishnah Berurah that you're not allowed to put pants into a press on Shabbos for Sunday or for Monday. Why? Because what you're doing is tzarech choil. You're not doing tzarech Shabbos. What are you doing over here? It's kind of like livda de choil. But it doesn't seem that what you're doing over here is tzarech Shabbos, and therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, you're not allowed to do it. Now, okay, isn't there a problem with tikkun moneh? Why isn't there a problem here of tikkun moneh to go ahead and put the pants into the press? It seems to be a very pashut question. And the Taka asked this kasha. I mean, he's basing this, the Mishnah Berurah is getting this from Rashi. I mean, this is what Rashi says. Rashi says that the reason why you're not allowed to put Sunday's pants into the press on Shabbos is because it's doing hachana from Shabbos to Chol. But they all asked the kasha, I don't understand. And if it was L'tzar Shabbos, it would be mutter? You're telling me I'm not allowed to fold my begodim on Shabbos because of a problem of tikkun moneh, but I'm allowed to put them into the press, and that's not tikkun moneh? It seems to be very, very confusing. It could be so what some want to suggest is that Pshat and Rashi is like this. Pshat and Rashi is, let's say you had two begodim in the press. You had your Shabbat, I guess it's a kind of press maybe that you could put two clothing items into at the same time. So maybe you had your Shabbos pants in the press and you had your Sunday pants in the press. You opened up the press and you took out your Shabbos pants. Now you want to close the press with your Sunday pants in them. Now tikkun moneh it's not going to be, because since the pants were already in the press, they're already pressed. Since they're already pressed, it's no longer tikkun moneh. Now the only problem is that by closing the press, you're doing achana, because you're definitely, there's no point in closing the press. The only point of closing the press is to keep the Sunday pants nice and pressed. So maybe that's Pshat and Rashi. I think others want to say that Pshat and Rashi might be that putting something into the press the effect of it didn't take place for a long time, so maybe it wasn't tikkun mana, but it's a little bit of an interesting Mishnah Berurah, this one over here. Not going to go into it more than that right now. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Kaf Aleph, you're not allowed to open up the commercial press. Why? Because it was closed b'chaska. It was closed very firmly. What if you had a commercial press and it was already loosened on Erev Shabbos? There are those that say even if it was partially open, you're not allowed to open it more. But there are those who are mekel. But if it was really released, if the commercial press was completely released already on Erev Shabbos, then Rabbi Kiva Eger says you definitely would be allowed to take your clothing out of the press. Sif Hey, third line down, end of the line. Choluk. Now a choluk is like an undershirt. A choluk was not an outer garment. A choluk was an inner garment. And that's very important here. Choluk la'achar kvisa. The way the materials and fabrics that their undershirts were made out of, the nature of them were choluk la'achar kvisa, a choluk after it was laundered, hu miskashe. The fabric would become very stiff. They didn't have fabric softener, and I think that their fabrics, by and large, were much coarser and less refined fabrics. And the nature of them was that when you washed the choluk and then it dried, you dried it outside in the sun, or you dried it in the wind outside, it would get very stiff and very hard. And that would be uncomfortable. Imagine putting on a stiff undershirt. It's not going to be comfortable. Choluk la'achar kvisa hu miskashe. A choluk, after it would be laundered, would become hard. And the way to deal with this was umishafshifim oisai biyadayim l'rakachai. You would take a freshly laundered and dried undershirt, and you would take it and you would rub it in your hands. You would crinkle it up and rub it in your hands. And that would soften it. Says the Mechaber, mutter la'asaysay b'Shabbos. You're allowed to do this on Shabbos. Now, it seems that part of the chiddush over here is, and I'm not sure that I understand the mitzias of this, actually, is that rubbing the garment had two effects. One effect it had was to soften it. But somehow the other effect, and now that I'm picturing it in my mind, I think I can understand it better. The other effect was it made it look better. Now, when I say that it made it look better, I don't mean because before it was stiff and now it's soft, so it drapes nicely. More, the lashon that we're going to see over here is letzachtzachai. Letzachtzachai literally means to brighten something. And somehow, when you had the choluk that was dry and stiff, when you rubbed it, besides the effect of softening it, it also somehow had an effect to brighten it and to improve its appearance. That's why we need a heter over here to go ahead and rub it. Because you might have thought that to rub it might again fall under the rubric of malabain. Remember what we dealt with in Sif Aleph. In Sif Aleph, we dealt with somebody who wants to take a garment to shake it out. And by shaking it out, he might be doing malabain. If it has droplets of dew on it, it might be malabain. According to Rashi, taking a garment that's dusty and shaking out a dusty garment might fall under malabain, because you're doing a maisa, which is not really a maisa of laundering, right? That's the way we learned Sif Aleph. Shaking out the garment is not really a maisa of malabain, but if your kavana in doing it, if it's effective, if it has a significant effect of malabain, and you're makbid, and you're doing it for malabain, then we said it becomes aser because of malabain. Over here by the choluk, in a way we're dealing with the same shaila. You're taking the choluk and you're rubbing it. Now rubbing it is not really a mice of malabain. There's certainly no liquid involved, and this is not typical malabain, just to take a dry garment and rub a dry garment. That wouldn't be typically malabain. But if it has a malabain effect, because it does brighten the garment and improve the appearance of the garment, you might think that this becomes elevated to a mice of malabain. Says the Mechaber, it's not. Why isn't it? Because we're dealing with a choluk. A choluk is an undershirt. Nobody is doing the shifshuf, the rubbing of the undershirt, for the purpose of malaben. And let's remember, we're dealing with a freshly laundered undershirt, right? So you're not doing this for malaben purposes. You're only doing it to soften it. And doing it to soften it, that is not an act of malaben. That's not laundering. And therefore, says the Mechaber, Choluk lacha kvisa, hu miskashik etzar, du b'shavchish v'masam yadayim l'rakachoi, you rub it in order to soften it, mutter la'asai se b'Shabbos. You're allowed to do this at Shabbos. You know why? She'ena miskaven ela l'rakachoi. Because you're only doing it to soften it. You're not doing it for anything else. So there's no malaben. Aval, however, says the Mechaber, Sudar, a shawl-like garment that you wear outside your clothing, Osir, you're not allowed to rub it. The shawl that you wear outside that people are going to see, part of the kavanah of rubbing it is litzachtzachai. It is to improve its appearance. And therefore, this would fall under Sif Aleph. This now would fall under, you're doing a maisa, even though it's not intrinsically a maisa of malaben, but you're doing something that has a significant malaben effect, and we assume, since it's a sudar that you wear exposed, we assume that you're doing it for the purpose of malaben, and therefore it's aser, you're not allowed to do it. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Chav Beis, by the choluk it's mutter, aval also legalgal ayidei kli kaminik. But to use a special utensil that was made for softening the garments, that you're not allowed to do. I believe this is because, again, now it starts to become tikkun moneh. Certainly you cannot press creases into a garment. Now you're starting to deal with makeh b'patish. The shawl you're not allowed to rub. Whether you're rubbing the outside of the sudar or you're rubbing the inside of the sudar. The reason the Mishnah Berurah makes mention of this is because later on, I believe in Sif Zayin, in Sif Zayin, we're going to see that by certain types of begadim, there is a difference whether what you're doing to the inside of the garment or the outside of the garment. By the sudar, the Mechaber said it's aser because part of your kavanah is to brighten it. You're much more makbid on the appearance of a sudar. And therefore, our assumption is that when you're doing the shifshuf, when you're rubbing the sudar, part of your kavanah is tzitzuach, which would fall under malabin. By the undershirt, we say that your kavanah is to soften it. Now realize, says the Mishnah Berurah, if for some reason you did rub the undershirt in order to brighten it up and shine it up, it would be just as aser. The point of the Mechaber is that by the choluk, our default assumption is that you're only doing it to soften it, you're not doing it l'tachtzachai. But if you are doing it l'tachtzachai, it would be aser. Let's go to the Ramah, 3 lines off the bottom. It says the Ramah Hago. The koivaim, hats, caps, usha'ar clay pishton. Apparently, it was very common for them to have linen caps. So says the Ramah, caps, which were linen, usha'ar clay pishton, or other linen garments, dinon kisudar, those have the halacha of a sudar, where by default we assume that if you're rubbing a linen garment, you're doing it for tzitzuach, you're doing it to shine it up and brighten it up, and that would be aser al malaben. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we're talking about linen hats. The reason we're more machmir by linen garments is they get especially stiff after they're washed. And whatever you do to soften it also is part of the laundering process. However, when it comes to an undershirt would be mutter even if it's made out of linen. Because it's an undergarment. And it's not something visible to most people. So the default would be, our assumption would be that you're really only doing it to soften it up. Okay, we're going to break over here and we'll continue with Sifav next time. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The discussion of limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shalom should send Yeshua's, Refuah's, Parnas, and Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zoichet to see the Bias Goyel Tzedek, B'mher v'yameinu, Amen. Be well.